Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest webinar as part of the Sustainable Foods Conference, which is being held in London in a few weeks' time on the 6th and 7th of November at the Queen Elizabeth II Centre. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Duncan Williamson, the Global Strategic Lead Food System Transition for Forum for the Future. And we are going to spend, hopefully, Duncan, the next 30 minutes discussing all things about sustainable nutrition. What does it mean, how we deliver it, and what are we going to do in the future to fix our food system? Because, as I'm sure you're going to tell us very briefly, there are 3 billion people currently who technically have classified as low quality diets. Our population is going to reach 10 billion, even 11 billion by some estimations in the next 25 plus years. The food system contributes to a third of greenhouse gas emissions, of which livestock represents 15% of that figure. And also additionally, it contributes significantly to our water usage and other biodiversity issues. So how are we going to deliver these outcomes? Duncan, I would like to start off first by asking you to give a brief welcome from yourself, who you are, what your focus is at Forum for the Future, before we dive into some good questions. Over to you, Duncan.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Yes, and it's great to be here. So, yeah, I'm Duncan Williamson. I am, as I've said, I'm at Forum for the Future. I've been working on food systems and sustainable diets for over 20 years. So I started sort of doing this work in the early sort of 2000s. I've got a bit of a background. My family had a small holding, so I was brought up on a farm. And my earliest memories are things like chickens and getting soil under my fingers and pickling and storing food for winter. But yes, I've worked with sort of several organisations in this field. And at the moment, I'm really fortunate enough to be working with Forum for the Future. And our focus is looking at just and regenerative food systems. And we've got particular areas we work on. We're looking at regenerative agriculture and aquaculture. We're looking at sort of place-based solutions, recognising that local solutions, whether they're in urban environment or rural environment, are absolutely key to delivering the solutions we need. And then looking at how do we reframe the food narrative to deliver sustainable food for all, to make sure it's socially just, and to deliver sustainable, healthy diets for all. And so, yeah, so it's quite a broad remit, but it's quite an exciting one to be at.
You had an absolutely vital remit, and we do thank you, Duncan, for joining us. Forum for the Future are one of our media partners for Sustainable Foods London. So we're looking forward to not just this conversation, but also the participation at the show. Before we start, if those who are watching, would love some of your questions. So if anything, generates some good questionnaires or anything that, would like to pose to Duncan or myself, we'd love to answer them throughout the next half an hour or so. Duncan, I'd like to kick off by really asking, where are we in terms of diet? What is the norm in terms of what we're eating in the UK, and even looking at a broader level, and in terms of how has our diet evolved, in the past decades or so?
Yeah, so I might sort of start that in reverse, because I think it's really important to recognise that diets are always changing, and they have always evolved, they've always changed. And you sometimes hear people going, oh yes, we've always eaten like this, and that's just not true. And so, I mean, the current diet is very much a product of the industrialization of the food system. So from the 1950s, 1960s, so much has changed. Everything from what you put on your what you eat for breakfast. I mean, breakfast cereal is a modern invention. So it's like we never used to eat it. My grandparents never eat it. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. Modern invention. So diets are always evolving. And one example I like to give is, though I grew up on this small holding and we had chickens, and we had quite a few chickens, we never ate chicken in the 70s and 80s. Chicken was very much a luxury food, and it would only be if one of the girls stopped laying that we'd eventually maybe have a stew. But from the 70s, when chicken was a luxury, to the end of the 80s, everyone was eating it every single day, having it in sandwiches, which is also a modern invention. So diets are changing rapidly, particularly as food systems industrialize. And in the case of chickens, we invented broiler chickens, and they could grow faster and quicker for good or ill. So as diets have changed, what we've noticed is we have moved away from almost a whole food approach. We've moved away from an approach where a lot of people knew where their food was coming from. It was a lot more sort of based on fruit, vegetables, different cuts of meat, etc. And we've evolved to where a lot more packaged food, a lot more ultra processed foods have come in, which are very exciting at the time, really good. And for some people, they've made food more available for them, so they've been able to have access to more food. So we've seen a decrease. We had seen a decrease in hunger, and as people started to eat more food, but that has sort of started to go the other way now. Between 60 and 80% of the average person's diet is ultra processed food. And we recognize that ultra processed food is something that should only be a tiny part of your diet. It shouldn't be a major bit of your diet. We're also still eating more sort of livestock products than we've ever done before. And that's partly because they've become more affordable as we've industrialized the food system. And the other parts of our diet is we tend to overeat things like protein. We eat far too much protein. The average person is 50 to 100 times more protein than they need for a healthy diet, whether it's a plant-based protein or a livestock protein or from fish. And where we are still failing as a nation is we don't eat enough plants. We don't particularly eat enough vegetables. The 5 a day campaign started about 30 years ago, and then the average person ate 2.1 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. 30 years later, we're still eating 2.1 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. So we haven't got any better in that time. So we don't eat enough plants, particularly vegetables and legumes and things like that. We overeat carbohydrates. And the one nutritional part of our diet we're missing is we don't have enough fiber in our diet. We need to really get more fiber in our diet to have a healthy diet.
I completely agree, Duncan. I mean, industrialization played a rapid role in where we are, but surely consumer habits and trends must have changed in that period. So you've mentioned, the breakfast cereal is a fairly modern invention. What were people eating before that? And then what has made them switch to, obviously, it's far easier to eat a breakfast cereal than, cook an omelette or whatever. Yeah. But how have we got here in such a total change, frankly?
Oh, it's a radical change. It's quicker than it's ever happened before because we used to eat what was available. I mean, first of all, we never used to eat 3 meals a day. That is a reasonably modern construct in the last 100 or so years.
Oh, really?
And the whole idea of breakfast is the most important meal of the day was a marketing slogan. So it came about the same era as go to work on an egg. So it's been very much a case of our eating habits have changed. We never used to snack either. That's a real modern construct, because snacking, we never used to have packs of crisps and eat chocolate bars and stuff like that. So, and people being hangry is again another modern invention. But when we used to eat normally, say 2 meals a day, we used to get up early. You'd have quite a big meal if you had breakfast, or you'd wait a few hours until you'd been awake, and then it would be sort of some kind of carbohydrate. So porridge was popular. We ate eggs. If you lived in the coastal community, you ate fish. You ate that things you might have eaten the remainder of last night's dinner. So that's kind of what it was like. And under the guise of convenience, we suddenly introduced things like breakfast cereals, and then we started adding free gifts to them, sugars to them, so they get more palatable. What I would say is around that, as we've evolved, so has how food is sold to us evolved. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there's been an increase in how we sell food. You see it on the television, and lots of food for the adverts. There's lots of use of, say, cartoon characters on breakfast cereals, though countries like Chile and Mexico are banning that as a tool. And so we're marketed food, and we are, as creatures, we will respond to good marketing. So that has got to be part of it. There's also what's on offer to us, what's sold to us. If it's not sold to us, we're not going to buy it. So you've got that as well. So, and then you look at the affordability and the price of food. That also dictates some of our decisions. So what I'm saying is, as people, we have a responsibility for what we eat, but there's also the role of marketing, retailers, corporates. They are the ones who sell us food. They are the ones who sort of place it where we can buy it. Government has a massive role in this to do regulation, to enforce it. How does it support tax breaks, etc.? So the planning regulations, there's all these different elements to it. So we can't just say it's one group that has sole responsibility. They all do.
No, I completely agree. I mean, in terms of marketing, that's a key point you've just raised. And we've had various initiatives posed by the governments that are either delayed or scrapped. Is there, you mentioned in terms of, there is a goal for big multinationals to market the various processed and ultra processed foods that they have on the shelf. Is there a way for them to change their marketing strategy to look at new products that can help our diets and health?
Yes, I mean, and I think some of them are starting to do that. They are starting to look at what their offers are. Some of them are looking at buy one get one free, recognizing that it's not always right to have buy one get one free on the ultra processed unhealthy food.
Yeah.
And so some of them are stepping up. The retailers are starting to think a lot more clearly about what's happening. Traditionally, they've never really given very good promotions on fruit and vegetables, and some of them are starting to do that. Even if it was Tesco's a few years ago, I think started giving away free fruit and vegetables to children.
Yeah.
And for some families, that's an absolute lifeline. So some of them are starting to do it, and some of the foods that are getting on the shelves, it's still ultra processed, but it's getting on the shelves is healthier. It's not just low sugar or low fat, but it's actually making sure what's in there is good for you, not replacing I don't know, fat with some kind of weird ingredient that no one really knows what it is. So some of them are starting to do it, and you're seeing in the food service sector that some of the food service companies, whether it's in your canteen or in a restaurant, they're starting to put calories on the dish. They're starting to sort of put the healthier food first, because you normally tend to choose from the first few pages of the menu rather than the end of the menu. So they're starting to try and do better, but they've still got a long way to go.
It's been 11 minutes, Duncan. I've asked you one out of a variety of things. So I'm going to jump to the next one, which is, the title of this webinar is what does sustainable nutrition mean, how we deliver it. So I'm going to ask you, what is sustainable nutrition to you? Okay. What does that mean to the general consensus and to you personally?
So again, it's quite a new term. It's quite a new subject that we're only now getting to grips with. It's a term that, again, it means slightly different things, different people. Like a lot of these terms, like plant-based or regenerative, people can use them or misuse them in how they choose to.
Overuse them.
Overuse them as well. Yes, you see it everywhere. You go, oh, I don't know what it means anymore. I mean, the first thing is to remember with nutrition, there's no one-size-fits-all nutritional profile. It depends on your age, your sex, your race, even your culture. So nutrition is quite complicated and quite specific. But for me, sustainable nutrition essentially brings together a variety of areas. It brings together health and nutrition. It brings together the environmental sort of impacts of your food. There's the economic element of as well. And then there is the social and cultural, which I think is often overlooked. It's really important to bring in the social and the cultural element to it. But underpinning it, it's about getting food that is good for people and good for the planet into the mouths or onto the tables of everyone. So it's food that must be available, it must be affordable, and it must be accessible to everyone.
You mentioned the social and cultural element of sustainable. Can you dive into that a bit? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's recognizing that all over the world, wherever you are, it is possible to benefit from sustainable nutrition, but you might eat very, very different foods. So depending if you come from, I don't know, Ethiopia to southern India, Thailand, or Birmingham, your food history and culture may be slightly different. So you may prefer the spice. You may like to have a lot more fish in your diet. You may be coconut, whatever it is. It's got to be something that you would recognize as part of your culture, something you want to eat. And others might want to eat as well, of course. But it's culturally as being specific to that culture. And as long as it's made up of the same core ingredients, which most food diets traditionally are when it's available, are also very heavily based on plants, carbohydrates, that sort of thing. So it's something that you as a culture would eat.
On that note, I mean, that's one of the greatest benefits, in my opinion, of globalization, bringing in different cultures and cuisines to our homes. But to you, what is a sustainable diet? I mean, what does that comprise of? How much to live a balanced diet, and let's say for this conversation, not over snacking, which I'm a big benefit of, advocate of. What is a balanced diet?
I mean, I was going to say it's difficult, but I would say that it's been quite clear for a while. And so a sustainable diet, when I first started working on it about 2008, I was at WWF, and alongside the United Nations Environment Programme and the Brilla Foundation, we all at the same time defined what a sustainable diet was independently, way before anyone else was doing it. And that hasn't actually really changed that much about there. Some of the science behind it has improved, but the actual core components haven't. And that's why I think it's not too difficult. And fundamentally, what it is it lots and lots of fruit, vegetables, nuts. It's plants. You've got to have them. It's really important when you look at whatever you're eating. About half of what you eat should be fruit, vegetables, nuts, beans.
Really?
You can't. Yeah, it's not that difficult when you think about it. There's 6,000 edible plants in the planet, so there's a lot of variety there. So there's no need to think it's dull. And so you've got that, and then if you've got that, about half the food you eat is plants. Then you can also, the next bit is carbohydrates. They've had a lot of bad press, but carbohydrates are wonderful. We need carbohydrates. So yeah, a good chunk of the rest of your plate or your diet should be like carbohydrates, and that's everything from sweet potato to brown rice. Maybe avoid some of the ultra processed ones as your main form of carbohydrate, like white bread, etc., because we know that's got all kinds of other impacts. Then you've got your protein, and yes, we should all eat protein, but remember, protein isn't just meat. There's room for all kinds of others. I'm a big advocate for beans. I'm not a vegan, but I love beans, and I think if everyone just ate a lot more beans, we'd all be a better place. And then you've got room for a bit of dairy. Of course, you'll need a bit of dairy and stuff like that. And then you've got your treats, so your snacks, your ice creams, your sweets, your cakes. Of course, have something every day. Just don't have it 3 times a day, 3 meals a day. And if you did that, you broadly got what would be a sustainable, healthy diet.
Yeah.
And it's not that difficult to do. And just to help you with how easy it is to do, the term plant-based never used to mean vegan. It used to be how you'd provide your plate of food. And it was plant-based because the first thing you put on a plate is what you put most on a plate. So if the first thing you put on a plate is plants, is your veggies and stuff like that, then you put your carbohydrates on, and then you put your protein on, chances are you're going to have a sustainable plate of food.
Can I ask, one of our viewers, Ursula's touched upon this, why are we not following that balanced diet that you just mentioned? Obviously, Ursula's gone into issues such as urbanization, greater, women working, etc., more leisure activities. So why is that lifestyle, I don't want to say so distant, but, it is quite away from, what the majority of people, eat in terms of 3 times a day?
So, yeah, from what I understand is there's a few components to why we don't do it. One is just the accessibility and the availability. So a lot of people, particularly people on lower incomes, they live in so-called food deserts. So they don't really have, it's not available for them. It's not sold. They don't go to shops and see it there. There's lots of fast food places. There's lots of junk food available, but there's not this food. And you do tend to see people on slightly higher incomes and in the more middle class areas have more access to more of these whole foods, but they still don't eat it. They have access to it.
Yeah.
So that's not the only thing. They don't eat it. When you go shopping, it's often put at the front of a store, and most people hurry past the first part of the store that they see. If we rearrange retailers and put that somewhere else in the store, you'll probably see a bit of an uptake for it. So it's how they're laid out. And then there's also, you don't really see it advertised anywhere either. You so rarely see a restaurant or a retailer going, come to my supermarket, come to my restaurant and have these bananas. They're not. They're trying to get you to buy your plant-based burger or, I don't know, your spaghetti bolognese, whatever. So advertising is also part of this as well. We don't promote it. And there's loads of studies around this. And then there's the final thing where there's a bit of a cultural thing where people are still saying, oh, plants are boring. This type of food is dull. Oh, there's no value added to that. I can't really eat that. Why would I want to eat that? It's rubbish. It's bland. It's boring. And I think as a nation, we've forgotten how wonderful and delicious these foods are. We've forgotten how to cook them as we've fallen in love with meat, basically, and other foods like that. So there's always different elements to it, and there's also a slightly macho culture where you don't need plants. You need to eat other things. Plants, they're just an afterthought. They're dull. So I think that these are the elements I'm seeing, but I'm not saying that's scientifically proven.
There are 2 points actually from the audience lead nicely to what you've just said, Duncan. The first is in terms of we eat too much meat. That's a fact. Everyone is eating too much meat unless you're a vegan. So what is the right level of meat, of protein, etc.? How much should you be eating?
So it does depend on what you're doing, but very, very few people need to eat large amounts of protein. Even if you go to the gym loads and stuff like that, you probably don't need to eat any more protein if you're eating a healthy, balanced diet. So what they say is basically about what fits into the palm of your hand. So if you had that with every meal, that is plenty of protein. And it's just remembering that proteins, yeah, but you have a lot of people go, but meat's the best source of protein, or you've got to eat beans, they're the best sort of protein. To be honest, just eat good quality protein, ideally not ultra processed, and that's fine. Just you don't need to have as much as you're having.
Often,
which is
daily?
Couple of times a day. That's all you need. You don't need it with every single meal. Again, that's a bit of a myth. And when you do eat too much protein, it doesn't give you any extra benefits. All that happens is you excrete it out really quickly. So you're almost wasting money by eating the excessive protein.
The last point I want to discuss about diet and nutrition before we move on to climate, which is obviously interlinked, is in terms of lifestyles. A lot of people are stuck in their lifestyles. They want to move to a healthier diet, but it's difficult. I mean, how can you help people change their lifestyle? Exercises can be quite easy for some people, but diet is often the root cause. You can't exercise a poor diet, is the famous phrase. So what can be done to change dietary lifestyles?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult one because the environment we live in outside of your home can make it really hard sometimes to have that change you want. There's so much temptation on offer, and again, restaurants are not always that good at putting front and center the healthy options and the mentality as we go out for a treat. So it's not. I mean, I wish I could wave a magic wand for this. I mean, all I know is that what I've done and seen what others done. You need to be helped to learn to cook. People need to get confidence with cooking and preparing vegetables. And I know people say they're time poor in this day and age, but bear in mind the average person spends 5 hours a day on social media, and most people in their spare time will also be watching television for 2 or 3 hours in the evening while probably being on social media, to be honest. So for me, I'm a big fan. When you can, reprioritize food. So with my family, my children are 8 and 7. We cook together. That's going to be a family activity. We're going to cook together. We're going to try and eat together. Just once or twice a week we eat together. We can't do it every time, but try and bring that sort of sense of fun back to food. And it's not a chore, it's fun. So that kitchen gets trashed, but it's a fun thing to do. And that's worked for me. May not work for others.
Yeah, well said there, Duncan. I mean, I would like to now move into what we're eating. The general, we are over consuming in everything, not just meat, carb, everything. We're overeating. So, in terms of what we eat matters, which we've discussed, just now. I mean, how is that, for a better phrase, cooking the planet? What can we do to help support our climate challenges whilst maintaining, a more improved lifestyles and diets?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we know is about the current food system. So just a quick few numbers just there. So yeah, you've already mentioned how it's almost a third of global greenhouse gas emissions come from the food system. When people try to say that's not true, all the evidence points to it. It's the whole food system from farm to fork, but including the inputs, the feed that goes into animals, etc. It's also the food system uses 70% of available fresh water.
Yeah.
It's between 60 and 80% of global biodiversity loss can be attributed to the food system. And if you look at it in the United Kingdom, we are the most biodiverse, depleted country in Europe and one of the worst in the world.
Yeah.
And this is fundamentally, there's other reasons. There's things like chopping down forests for boat building and stuff, but a lot of it is connected to the food system. The uplands of England used to be covered in trees. Now they're covered in sheep. I've got nothing against sheep, but it's worth making the connection. So the food system is the big one from an environmental perspective, and it can be changed. It can be fixed. We know that if you do agriculture right and you eat the right amounts, you stop wasting food, it's actually going to be one of the big tools for regenerating the planet, restoring nature, and giving us this resilient future that we all want.
Yeah, I completely agree. And on that note, I would like to give us some positivity in terms of what we can do to help, implement personal and also on a broader level, cross-country solutions to help implement and improve our food system through better diets.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I was always asked sort of what I think, and it's a daily battle anyway at home, but I think first of all, just waste less food. People still are wasting about 30% of the food they buy. And that would be like, if I gave you £100 and then you put, what's it, £33 or something in the bin, you wouldn't do that, but you're doing that with food. It's a ridiculous thing that we're doing. And if you do that alone, you'll save money and you'll start saving the environment. So that's a really, really simple one that yeah, just look at it. Don't overbuy and don't waste it. Just use it all. Learn how to use everything. Then when you're having food, it's just a case of, as well as trying not to overeat, because a lot of people just put too much on their plate. Yeah, put a little bit less on your plate. That always works. And people have often said just use a smaller plate, but put a little bit less on your plate. If you're still hungry, go back for more. It's really simple. Go back for more if you're hungry. Don't just overpile your plate, which will either result in wasting food or you eating too much, which is going to be bad for your health. So it's a few simple things, and then looking at what you're buying. I know it's difficult. I know we're all time poor, but look at what you're buying. Think about it. When you look at your shopping basket, how much of that is fast food, unhealthy food, and how much is healthy, and try to just rebalance what you're buying a little bit more, because it's not dull. It's really exciting food when you really get into it. And a tip I got for that anyone could do, and I love it, there's a campaign behind this as well, is try to eat 30 different plants every single week, because that will be really sustainable. And that's fruit, veg, nuts, but it's also spices and herbs. And the first challenge you should give yourself if you're learning about food is, can you name 30 different plants that you can eat? And you'll be amazed the amount of people that can't. And so I had to write them down and go, it is, isn't it? It's really hard. Yeah. But they now say if you do that, you'll be having a whole variety of nutrition. You'll have a really varied diet. You'll eat the rainbow, which is a really nice way of eating things.
Yeah.
Then you'll have a substantial move towards a sustainable diet, which is, I just think it's really exciting. And by adding herbs and spices, the flavors are going to be amazing.
Can I follow up on that, Duncan, which also a viewer has mentioned in terms of, there are hundreds of vegetables we can eat and plants, and in terms of choice, that's quite a lot of choice. Now, a lot of these, vegetables and plants are shipped around the world out of season, which is simultaneously probably worse for the environment than eating meat, etc. So what are your recommendations on that? And what are the chances of supermarkets, emptying their shelves and offering less to help the climate challenge? This was posed by Graham.
Oh, I mean, I love that question, but so first of all, I'm not so worried about where food comes from. If it's air freighted, then of course that's just ridiculous just to air freight stuff around the world just so we can have a really fresh set of beans or something, or strawberries in the winter. But when you look at the environmental impact of food, the transport is tiny, and it'll always be better to eat a vegetable than a piece of meat. Whatever people try to tell you, it'll always be vegetable. And remember, the term food miles was never meant to be a sustainability metric. Tim Lang, who invented it, was always clear about this. It was just where your food comes from. It's not a metric for how sustainable it is. Local doesn't always mean more sustainable. Again, local is a term that can mean absolutely nothing. Near my house, 2 miles away, you can go to the local farmers market. There's a person who sells eggs there. They are local eggs. They come from a battery farm, but they're local eggs. So they have them on trays as local eggs, and everyone goes, oh, look at this, they're local, and buys loads. So what's more important is looking at the food, getting more vegetables. If you're going to buy it's imported, there's always going to be questions. We know the issues of avocados. We know the issues of coconuts. But so look for things like your fair trade, things like that, because that gives you it's supported people in the community very well. That's what I would be looking at. And I would, when it's in season, because I think seasonality is more important than anything else. Wherever it is, whatever's in season, buy it in season. And if you can, then you will be supporting your nearest farmers in the UK. And out of season, you just sort of get what you can. And don't forget, it's not all about fresh. Sometimes the healthiest food is frozen or tinned. So fruit and veg that's frozen or tinned is actually fantastic, less waste, more affordable, and is a really good way to eat those foods.
Agreed completely. We've got 1 minute, Duncan. So how about a nice positive message to send for everyone before we head home?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say it, but I want to hear yours as well. But mine is we have the solutions. It's not that difficult. It's a tasty future. It's one we can all grasp readily. We can do it 3 times a day, and it's not something we should be as scared of. We should just be embracing it.
Yeah, you've put me on the spot here, but I'm going to go with, we can all cook more. We can cook nice, healthy, tasty, delicious meals that don't compromise on everyone's time, which is getting scarcer and scarcer with each passing year. I would like to thank you again, Duncan, for joining us. Duncan will also be at Sustainable Foods London in a few weeks' time. So please do come. Duncan will be speaking and moderating on alternative proteins and different types of protein. So please do join us. Thank you again, Duncan. A virtual round of applause for you, for everyone. And we hope to see you who are watching. See you soon in a few weeks. And yeah, thank you again to Duncan and Forum for the Future for wonderful support. Thank you all.
Thank you.